Welcome everyone to IME's free GAMSAT webinar 9. This is a special one. I know I say this after every webinar, but GAMSAT results, March GAMSAT results should be released anytime now. I think in the last couple of years, they have been released around this date. I mean, they might have been released today. I don't know. I just have to double check. They might be released tonight, but the release of results is imminent. If you would like to discuss your GAMSAT score and prospects for entry, you are welcome to contact me for a confidential consult, because the GAMSAT applications, they do close on May 31. So you do have about just under 2 weeks to get your applications in, and we can work through your specific preferences and which school you would have the best chance to get into. Now, a reminder, medical school entry guides for medicine, they are available. They have been available for a while. I know a lot of you are now aware that Notre Dame, Sydney and Fremantle, they don't accept portfolios anymore. So the only school left that accepts portfolio is University of Wollongong. However, they have replaced the portfolio with a CASPA, situational judgment test. So Wollongong and now both Wollongong and University of Notre Dame and Sydney have the CASPA exam. And they did also include bonus points for higher degree research or rurality. Now, your CASPA exam, there's 2 more dates left. There's May 28th and June 8th for your CASPA exam. You just have to apply using your GAMSAT ID to register. I think it's about $90 to $100 the exam. But it's only valid for 1 year. So if you sit the CASPA this year, so the next couple of weeks, it's only valid for 2024 entry. So if you are interested in getting into medicine next year, you have to sit the CASPA either on the 28th of May or the June 8th. Otherwise, you will miss out for Notre Dame. I do implore all of you to at least give CASPA a try. A lot of it is, well, with situational judgment test, it is ethical. They put you in ethical situations and you'd have to reply with what you would do in that situation. I think it's a great move by Notre Dame to involve CASPA and to remove portfolios. I think it makes it more equitable so that everybody can get involved. And we don't know what the score, so you get, it's worth 30% of your score for interview offer. They don't tell you what your score is. You'll never find out. But the whole point is, at least it's the first time going round. You might as well give it a shot and just apply for Notre Dame, because it's a lot more, the word isn't easier, it's just a lot more available now to more candidates to apply. So I would recommend all of you to consider sitting the CASPA exam. Now, as I said earlier, GAMSAT medical school application do close in 2 weeks. If you want to find a summary of the application process and relevant requirements for medicine, dentistry, and optometry, you can find them on our website, or you can find them via the mailing. So I've sent them via the mailing list, or you can just email me privately and I can send you the 4 summary documents. So today's session, we will be focusing on a famous Shakespearean poem, so a sonnet, and biochemistry in visual form. I know a lot of you would be probably stressing about your GAMSAT results and probably your applications. So I tried to make today's session a lot more streamlined, to let your hair down. Obviously not my hair, but your hair, I guess. So it'll be nice and relaxed. And finally, a reminder that these webinars are recorded and you will receive a link to access this and previous sessions via mailing list. If you do want to get onto our mailing list, just contact me directly. I'll send more information on the next slide. You can, if you're probably watching this on YouTube or on our website or wherever, you can find the other recordings on our playlists. So, please do follow us on social media. Again, at imemedical.com, you can find a lot of free material, exams, interview prep stuff, interview questions, also Section 2 generator. There's a lot of free material there available. If you just search Institute of Medical Education or at IME Medical onto YouTube, you can look at pre_IME and at IME Medical for TikTok. So look, we try our best to give you as much content as possible. We know that obviously in a post-COVID environment, especially with interest rates and GDP and inflation, it is becoming a lot more difficult to prepare for GAMSAT. That's why we're offering a lot of these free material for you. And if you want something more, you can obviously inquire about our programs. If you want to enroll in our programs, you can just email me directly or just contact us and we can talk through there. Otherwise, if you are in the Gold Coast, you can come to our head office here in Benoa. It's about 5 minutes west of Surfers Paradise. We can have a chat. We can have a nice confidential consult, or students already on the program, you can have a tutorial with us, and it would be a great experience. I mean, who doesn't want to come to the Gold Coast, especially now it's getting cool, the weather, it's still beautiful outside. If I look outside, it's still sunny. I mean, where would you rather be, honestly? So today, we're going to look at section 1, analysis of poems. So we're going to take a look at a very famous Shakespearean sonnet. I think it's sonnet 60. And next, a figure or a diagram of flow cytometry, specifically annexin and staining of cells. And finally, address any questions you may have. And if you do have any questions, if you're watching this video, this recorded video, you can just post them in the comment section, or you can contact us directly and we can go through them together. So, analysis of poems. So we're going to have 2 questions here for the first session. William Shakespeare's 154 sonnets, they were first published altogether in 1609, a very long time ago, about 500 years, 400 and a bit years ago. Now, they cover themes like the passage of time, love, infidelity, jealousy, beauty, and morality. The first 126 are addressed to a young man. And below, we've got sonnet 60. It's organized as 3 quatrains or stanzas and a couplet. Now, I think one of the most famous sonnets, which probably you should be looking at for examples of these sonnets, is I think sonnet 18. It shall I compare thee to a summer's day. But we're not looking at that sonnet today. We're looking at sonnet 60. But I do recommend that after today's session, if you want to get an idea of poetry and analysis of poetry, I think looking up William Shakespeare's sonnets is a great starting point, because they do discuss a lot of themes here. And at the same time, they do give you an idea, or Shakespeare's a master in literature, on how you can pack so much punch in such a small amount of space here. So what I'll do, so generally in the GAMSAT for section 1, so this year, there's no more, so technically perusal time is now included in the whole setup time. So the second essay you can start. So for section 1, you have 62 questions in 100 minutes. So if you do the math, it's about 1 minute 35, 36 per question. So we've got 2 questions here. What I'll do is I'll give you, if you're playing along at home, so let's say minute and a half, let's say 3 minutes 15 to finish both questions, to read this and finish both questions. Are you there with me, Kelly?
Reluctantly, yes.
Yes, reluctantly. What I don't want to throw you into the deep end with the sharks, but it's the only way you're going to have to learn how to surf, right? So I'll give you 3.5 minutes if you like, or would you like 4 minutes?
Let's see if we can do it in 3.5.
3.5, but look, don't worry. The whole idea is we'll go through it together. And we'll see, the whole point is obviously we'll see how it feels like to do it under GAMSAT conditions. So then we can see afterwards what your thought process was, and I can give you some tips on how I would approach it and how you could approach it. And those watching along as well, you can give us tips on how you would approach these sorts of questions. So what I'll do is I'll give 3.5 minutes. I'll start the time. Actually, I have a poll, so I might as well put the poll. I'll launch the poll, and then you can have a go, put your answers in the poll. It is anonymous, but you're the only one playing along, so I'm going to know who picked the answers. But I'll give you 3.5 3.5 minutes starting now.
How do I get the poll back up?
You might have to click on, if you hover up the top, it will say polls.
Because I'm on my phone, so I don't know.
Don't
That's
worry,
okay.
it's
I'll just
fine.
write them. That's fine. I'll write
That's
them.
all right. You're fine. You've got about a minute to go. Sorry,
Okay.
2 minutes. 2 minutes. 2 minutes.
That's fine.
We're about 30 seconds to go. Okay, we'll stop it there. How do you think you went there, Kelly? Can you tell me, what do you think this poem is about?
Death.
Death? Why do you think it's about death?
Just talking about time and how it runs out so quickly. I don't know.
You're on the right track. You're definitely there. About the time and the death bit. There is a link there.
Yeah.
If we walk through the first question, it says each stanza presents a self-contained metaphorical description of time's passage in human life. In the second quatrain, the speaker is comparing human life to what? So the second quatrain is here. So when we say quatrain, the different stanzas, the first stanza, second, third, and that's the couplet at the end. So if we just take a look at each stanza, so what's the first stanza? So it says here, each stanza is a self-contained metaphorical description of time and how it's passage for human life. So the first one, what do you think is the metaphorical idea in the first one? What is it comparing time to?
In the first stanza, like the first paragraph. I thought that was a clock.
Yep. So, but what is the metaphor though for the clock?
like
I'll
time
highlight some.
by,
The what, sorry?
like time passing by. Is that what you're like? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, but what's the metaphor though? So the metaphor is they're using what to represent time here?
Waves and pebble shores.
The beach. Yep. So they're
Yeah.
using the beach as the metaphor for time. So they're trying to say that time goes by so quickly. It's
So
kind of like a
quickly,
wave. They're representing time as it's ticking like a wave.
yeah.
And so do our minutes hasten to their end, like a wave on a pebbled shore. So it's like ticking time to the shore.
Yeah.
And you can see how it's kind of this doom and gloom that each changing place, which goes before in sequent toil, forwards do content. So it's kind of like saying that time is nearing an end. It's just going towards something, as you said earlier, kind of that death aspect.
Mm.
Now, the second quatrain, what do
I
you
had to
think
read
it's
that
using?
about 5 times.
So what do you think is using a metaphor? Now, with Shakespeare's poems, it's a big thing with context because Shakespeare loves. So when you're answering section 1 questions, one big important thing to remember is context. If you can understand the context in which something was written, it could help you understand how to answer the questions. Because Shakespeare's time, he, especially for the sonnets, he loves using. What do you think Shakespeare loves using as a metaphor to represent certain things? If you've read Shakespeare's poems in the past, do you think he likes using the tide, the sun, the moon, or the clock?
I'm just gonna say I've never read Shakespeare.
That's all right. That's fine. Some people don't like Shakespeare anyway, so it just gives you an idea of the time period, the 1600s.
Yeah.
What do you reckon? So let's have a look into this stanza here. Let's just highlight some things that stick out. So you say nativity of light, crowned, eclipse. So what do these represent?
The moon
Light,
or the sun?
crowned. I mean, yes, it's either going to be the moon or the sun. You've narrowed it down.
Mm.
So would you associate crown with the sun or the moon?
I would say the sun.
Yep, like corona, right? That's what corona means,
Yeah.
crown.
Yeah.
So the corona, the sun. So eclipses. So the idea here is the light as well.
Yeah.
So the context here in Shakespeare's time, he loves to use the sun as a metaphor a lot.
Okay.
He definitely does. If you're ever stuck on a Shakespeare question,
Yeah.
it's just another hint, but like it might not even be something to think about. But I've read a lot of Shakespeare's poems, and a lot of the times he uses the sun as some sort of metaphor. But you can see here in this, so this stanza he's talking about time passes relentlessly. And it's about he uses time as a tide. In the second one, he uses the passage of human life, because it's saying nativity. So once you're born, you become mature, and then you're crowned, and then what happens is your life gets eclipsed, and then it just goes away. So he's using the growth, I guess you can say, the sun and the span during the day as a metaphor for human life. So it starts off so it's nativity, it gets born, and then it matures, and it disappears, gets eclipsed. So it's kind of talking again, ravages of life. Same thing here, how it happens so quickly over here. So in the first stanza, he's used the metaphorical description of time's passage in human life by using the beach and the shore. Second one, he's using the sun. And I guess the third one, do you know what is discussing here in the third one?
I think my thought process with that, just going through each section, was like the question 2, I thought it was the angel of death, because that's the end of life.
So yes, so this quatrain is definitely talking about how life ravages, I guess, human time. So this is definitely about that. So when it says time doth transfix the flow set on youth and delves the parallels in beauty's brow, so it's kind of taken away their beauty, It feeds on their nature's truth, and it gets their scythe to mow. So it's kind of like it's a personified force. It's like a monster. It's digging trenches into you and is taking away your soul. But when it says here, despite his cruel hand, so that's the last bit. So this is why this poem is very famous. So you can see here in the first stanza, we're discussing time as we're describing it as, for example, we're using a metaphor of the beach and how time is going away very quickly. Over here, we're using the sun and it's rising and from nativity to maturity, and it gets taken away. Over here, we're using as the time as a monster taking away your youth. But what do you think the last couplet is saying? Because it says, and yet to times in hope, my verse shall stand, praising thy worth despite his cruel hand. What does this mean? Do you know what this means?
Like, now that I've sort of put everything together, and I'm choosing one of the 4 out of question 2, yes? I would say the young men, because they're at the start of their life. Yeah, I don't know.
That's fine.
Yeah.
So if the reason why I guess this is a very, very popular poem is because he spent the last 3 quatrains saying that time is going to ravage your youth, ravage your life. It's going to take everything away for you. And yet to times in hope, my verse shall stand. However, this poem is going to stand the test of time despite his cruel hand. So who's the cruel hand then? If this poem is going to stand the test of time. So who is it? Sorry? Time. That's correct. Yeah. So the whole point is, the reason why it's so popular is he just spent the last 3 quatrains saying time is a terrible monster and describing how time is so short. But to overcome time, I've written this poem so that you're going to be, your legacy is going to last forever. So it's going to, you're going to be praised. So this is such a very romantic poem. And I can tell you, in the 1600s, if a man told this to a woman, she'd be all over him, or a woman or a man or man, whatever. So, but men these days aren't this romantic, eh? So imagine humans were this romantic today. So you could see how beautiful it is, saying that no matter how bad time is and how short time is and how complex and ravenous time is, I'm going to make sure you stand a test of time, because I guess love, that's how big my love is for you. Yeah. So when it comes to Shakespeare's poems, I think to help you out in future section 1 question, because section 1 for a lot of people is difficult because it comes down to comprehension. How do I read something in such a short amount of time, extract all the important information to answer the questions? That's a comment I get a lot. I think there's 2 ways you can go about it. One, you can just read the question first to point you in the right direction, because you'd know straight away, okay, second quatrain, we're going to be looking here. But that might be a trick in the GAMSAT, because in the GAMSAT, they do that and you might have to read the paragraph before or after to actually get the answer. But you could do that, or I always say there is no substitute for careful reading. If you practice well enough, you will be able to read these complex poems and extract all the important information in a very short amount of time. It comes with practice. And the best way to do that is I would go back and start reading, say, poems from this time period and understand the context. Start understanding pieces of writing, let's say, written in the 1800s, what they're usually discussing. What was the big topic in the 1800s that everybody was talking about? You know, was it back in the 1300s, the plague, everyone's dying from the plague and stuff like that. So you want to understand the contexts in which these things were written, because what the hell was happening in 1609 for him to write these such beautiful, poetry, so what influenced Shakespeare to write this? Because if you understand the context, you'd know that there's certain techniques that a lot of writers in this time period would do. So these are the sorts of things you'd think about. Is there anything you'd like to comment about this poem? Kelly, is there anything you'd like to note?
No, it's just really complex. Like, it's just not something I've ever done before, so it's just a lot to take in, especially with even the way it's written. It's like foreign almost to, you know, pieces that I've read before. So it's just something I need to practice at. That's all.
Definitely, and you'll get there. I mean, like,
Yeah.
there's no reason why you won't. So it's just sometimes in the GAMSAT section 1, you'll get given a let's say a not a year old English, let's say a very recent English passage, which you should be able to comprehend, but it's probably like a whole page long. And how do I read a whole page and answer questions in such a short time? It comes down to, yeah, careful reading, but start off with the question, gives you context of where to go, and then you will become over time more efficient in actively reading what you see. So, but we'll work together over time, so don't worry about that. Is there anything else you'd like to point out, or should we move on to the section 3?
We can move on.
Okay, cool. Just get this. Look, section 1 is a pain for everybody. So, because God knows sometimes it's really hard to practice, because I mean they could pull out a verse or a text or something from literally a newspaper that was published in 1108, you know, and you'd have to answer about it. Sometimes it gets pretty abstract, but I mean, that's the GAMSAT, right? So hopefully this section 3 is, everybody says, the easier section because it's more pragmatic, right? Here's science. I know science. Let's see if we can answer it. So I've got here a nice figure of a graph produced by flow cytometry. So it says here we've got fluorescent conjugates of an X and V. It's used to identify or stain apoptotic cells. So those are cells undergoing programmed cell death. We do use another, so those in biochemical research labs, there is another, I say stain, I don't want to call it dye, that is used, or a fluorescent intercalator called 7-aminoacetonomycin D, so 7-AAD. And it's an intercalator that undergoes a spectral shift upon association with DNA in cells with damaged membranes. So below, it's an image just showing you by flow cytometry of eukaryotic cells treated by experimental anti-cancer drug for 72 hours and subsequently stained with both an X and V and 7-AAD. The image is separated into 4 quadrants, A, B, C, D. So we've got 2 questions. In section 3, you're generally given, I think it's 75 questions in 150 minutes, which means you should be spending about 2 minutes per question. So I'll give you 4 minutes for this one, and we'll come back, reconvene, and we can discuss. So your 4 minutes, I'll get the poll out actually as well. I mean, if you want to try out the poll, if it works. We'll start now.
So I'm finished, but I feel like I might have got it wrong.
No, that's perfectly fine. What I'll do is, for those playing along at home, you still have about another 2 and a bit minutes, and you can pause it to give you more time. But since Kelly's done, we might as well go through your rationale and answer. So with GAMSAT question, even though we say, let's say for section 3, it's 2 minutes per question, doesn't mean you have to finish it in 2 minutes. You can finish it in 10 seconds if you know the answer. But I guess the idea is, if you want to, when you're sitting the exam, you want to give yourself some sort of a benchmark or bookmark, so you know when to finish on, if you should hurry up or slow down. So can you walk me through the figure here then, Kelly?
So this light that the dye that they're using to look at the unhealthy cells is attracted to unhealthy cells and cell death. So necrosis. So sorry, we'll start with number 1. Sorry. In which quadrant would you find the greatest concentration of healthy cells? I said A, because it's got the least reaction.
So you've got this quadrant.
Yeah.
Okay. So
it's saying that it only reacts with damaged cells. And then for the second one, I also had A, because I thought it was A and C. It was like the least, because the B looks quite inflamed, like where the green and red and yellow is. But I also went A because it's necrotic cells death, and A has the least amount of reactant.
Cool. So let's look at the figure and let's walk through it, and let's see if we're going to leave the answers or we're going to change the answers. So when I know I'm such a, it's like the suspense, right? The suspense.
No, I can already tell they're wrong from your answer.
No. I have to keep a poke. It's a poker face. You could be right, you could be wrong. We don't know. Let's just walk through it together first, and then we can decide if you're going to keep your answer or we can change it. I'm like the millionaire hot seat, right? I'm going to give you the chance to leave your answer. I'm like Eddie Maguire, so to influence you. So it says here that an XNV is used to identify apoptotic cells, so obviously undergoing cell death. So we can assume that cell death means the cell isn't happy. So that's an XNV. Now, we're told there's an additional marker, 7AAD, that is an intercalate that undergoes a spectral shift upon associating with DNA in cells with damaged membranes. So I have a question for you, Kelly. Where do you usually find a DNA in a cell? In a eukaryotic cell, where do you usually find DNA?
In the nuclei?
Yep, and where else can you find DNA?
Oh my God. Is it the G? Gosh.
What do they always say is the powerhouse of the cell?
Oh gosh, I can't even think of the name of it. Hang on. Is it the ER or something?
Let me put it this way. It's like M&M's, but it starts with an M.
No, completely gone.
Mitochondria.
Mitosis. Mitochondria.
Mitochondria, yep. So the mitochondrion, so that's singular, that contains your mother's DNA, whereas the nuclei contains obviously all the DNA. So technically speaking, if you find DNA outside your mitochondria and outside your nuclei, what does that mean? Should you find DNA outside these systems? What does it mean if you find DNA outside these systems?
That they're compromised?
Yeah, so your cells are pretty much well damaged. And if you're finding DNA, so this stain shouldn't be crossing into your nuclei or into your mitochondria. So this stain is pretty much just staining the DNA that's outside of these organelles. If you're finding DNA outside of these organelles, it means that your cells have been compromised. Now, it's definitely, so we see here with necrotic cell death, we're told that necrotic cell death is categorized by loss of plasma membrane and integrity and membrane integrity and depletion of ATP. So you're losing your energy stores. So the idea is that apoptosis is generally, let's say, cell death. And then if necrosis is more, it's kind of like recycling. So if your cell goes beyond repair, so it just destroys the whole membrane and outside, necrosis is usually something that occurs after apoptosis, because it's when the cell is beyond repair, the cell just necrosis. It goes under necrosis. That's not necessarily true. I mean, necrosis can be an independent event, which I'll explain in a second. But generally, in a lot of cell types, you get apoptosis, which can be programmed or unprogrammed, and then following, you can get necrosis, which can be programmed or unprogrammed, so it can be necroptosis. This is all biochemical stuff that with further study will become second nature. But the whole point is that what we have here is two dyes, or two, I guess, fluorophores for apoptosis and the more later stage necrosis. So if we take a look at the quadrants, then what is this? So what are these numbers telling us? So what do you think these numbers are telling us, Kelly?
Sorry. The increase in...
Yep, so the intensity of that dye, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if it's telling you here, well, what do these dots represent?
What dots?
So all of these blue dots. What do they
Oh,
represent?
sorry, I can't see that on my phone.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so just the where the cell death is, or where the DNA.
Yeah, so that's just those are the cells that are expressing, for example, this dye or that dye.
Yeah.
So if you have a number 10 here and a number 10 here, what does that mean? If you have a cell, let's say this red dot here, what is that telling you?
That there's 10. I don't know.
That's all right. So you've got, let's say, a cell with an intensity of 10 for an X and V and a cell with an intensity of 10 for 7AAD. So if you have a high, so if I had a low intensity of these two, what does that mean then?
That there's less cell death, or there's less cells that are damaged in that part?
Yep. So that means then in this quadrant, what do we have? Because if you look at it, this quadrant has small amount of, so it's 1,000 in X and V, 1,000 7AAD. What do you think that is telling us? It's a small amount comparatively to these ones. What do you think is happening in quadrant C then?
So there's less in quadrant C than the other.
Yep.
Quadrant.
So there's less what? So there's less what?
Less cell death.
Yep. Because there's less staining. So there's less staining. So that means quadrant C is what then?
The least.
So the least cell death. So all of these cells, I guess, have the least amount of staining, which means it's probably going to be the quadrant where you have the most amount of healthy cells.
Okay.
I mean, we can put an arrow there, but let's go through each quadrant. So what do you think is happening in this quadrant then?
Sorry, which quadrant?
D, sorry, D, quadrant D.
Oh,
What do you think is happening?
Well, there's more because it's gone up on the...
Yep, so there's more what though? Is it an X and V or is it 7AAD?
An X and well, both really. I mean, they're both in that. They're both.
I mean, has the 7AAD changed much between C and D?
It's increased slightly.
This side has.
Yeah.
Because they're still about the same, I'd say, but this has, right?
Yep.
So it's telling you that this quadrant is, I mean, you can write down here, low 7AAD, low annexin V. This one has low 7AAD and high annexin. Because I mean, don't let the axes fool you. So you can see here that it's a very, very large. It's about 100,000, 10,000, 100,000. And next time you still have only about 1,000 7AAD stained. So it's not that high. So it's telling you here that you're getting, I'd say probably early stage apoptosis. But now we're moving up to this one, quadrant B. What's happening in quadrant B?
It's quite high with a
you
7.
got highs. Yep.
Yeah, 7AAD.
And high in X and V, right? So you've got, yep. So high both. So high 7AAD, high an X and V, So what is this telling you? So this one is probably late stage apoptosis, right?
Yep.
Because it's a lot of the cells are going through cell death. And you can see, because remember at the beginning, we said they were treated with a drug for 72 hours. So I guess it means the drug's probably working, right? So the cells are dying. What's happening in this quadrant though?
Well, it doesn't look like a lot.
What
But
what is
I
it
suppose it's
telling you
more,
though?
well, it might be that the necrosis is, there's so much cell death that they've already passed, and that's why they're so high. So there's not as much staining because they've already passed that stage. For me.
So with this quadrant, what would you label this quadrant? So is there much in X and V staining?
No, there's less or about the same as C. However, there's more 7AAD.
Yep. So there's more 7AAD. So high 7AAD, no in X and V. So what does that tell you then? What's happening in terms of the cell killing pathways or the death pathways?
So it's necrotic.
It's necrotic cell death. So these population of cells here are going through a cell death that's independent of apoptosis. So they're going through a cell death that's more necrotic. So if you were to do studies on these cells, you might find out that this drug is causing primarily apoptotic cell death, but there's a secondary effect where a specific population of cells are dying via necrosis or specialized necrosis. And you might actually want to do more research on them and say, why is this population of cells going through a different death pathway? Is there a specific gene? Is there a specific protein? What is it about this population of cells that's making it undergo a different kind of death pathway to the rest? So that's the beauty, I guess, of this sort of graph, because it gives you a lot of information. So then how would you change your approach then for number 2? What would you say the answer is for number 2? So which quadrant should you not find significant numbers of your necrotic cells? So you said A initially. What do you think the answer is then?
So the second question, necrotic cells, the most necrotic cells?
So it says, which one would you find not a significant amount of necrotic cells?
Not a significant amount. C. It would be maybe C and D. C and D.
Yep, C and D. So which one does that correspond to?
D.
D. Yep. So that's correct. So you got them correct. You got them correct after you went through the rationale, but you got the right answer. What we're going to do now is for GAMSAT, we have to shorten that time so you can do all of this in the space of 4 minutes.
Yeah.
So that's where the trick comes into it. So your what we can do is obviously refine it so that instead of taking 6 minutes to answer the question, we can take 4 minutes so that we can do it. So that's how it is, I guess, for section 3. It's a lot of refining your the way to get to the answer. But say you've got it there, we just have to flesh it out. So I think with this sort of stuff, with section 3, a lot of section 3, it comes down to prior knowledge. If you have prior knowledge in, let's say, biochemistry and using a flow cytometer, if you're someone who's worked in a lab before, you would have seen this straight away and be like, oh, I know how to answer this straight away, and answer the question and move on. So the best advice I can give for section 3, one, the easiest way to answer the question is if you do have a background in it. But 2, if you don't have a background, read up on it. So a lot of the biochemical, if I was looking at this sort of, what I'd take home from this GAMSAT question, start practicing looking at graphs with multiple dyes used. Because GAMSAT, they do love to add not just an XY graph, but they love to add another component where it's 2 other factors, 2 dyes rather than just 1 dye. It's not just an XY linear graph. You might get different quadrants, but in different populations based on different dyes. So that's something I would look into, how you can look at these sorts of graphs without getting tricked. Because it does get tricky if you've never seen it before. But if you have seen it before, it would definitely help. Do you have any comments on this figure, Kelly?
No, it's like once you point it out, you're like, okay, that makes sense, because clearly like that cell has gone through the later stages of death, of cell death. So then it makes so much more sense when you're looking at it, you're like, oh, okay, that's simple, but I suppose again it's just exposure to looking at this, like you said, looking at the graphs and just going over them one by one.
That's good. We've got a baseline, so we've got something to work towards, which is fantastic. That's the whole point. We want to find the baseline, and then we can work through it together, so that we can get to the point where in about, it could be a week's time, 6 months time, however long it takes, you will be teaching this to me, you know, so you will know a lot more than I will. No, you definitely have the capacity. Everyone does. So all it takes is hard work. So I know you're going to go back tonight and just read up on all this stuff as well. So
I am.
That's the good thing. That's what we want to do. That's perfect. I want to hear that, because it's like it just stimulates more and more learning. So that's the best part. So I think we'll leave it at that. I purposely made today's session a bit shorter because I wanted to, I guess I know a lot of people obviously getting into their GAMSAT scores and the applications, but I just wanted to make it nice, easy breezy for you, so you can just calm down, let the stress out. There is only about, what are we now? May 18, about 4 months until the GAMSAT, just under 4 months. So we've got a long time, so we can get into it. Do you have any questions before I sign off, Kelly?
No, I'm good. Thank you for your time.
No, that's okay. To those watching at home or anywhere around the world, if you have any questions, you can post into the comment section. This will be uploaded soon to social media. If you want help with your application, you can contact me. I do have downloadable cheat sheets for you to download or to access to help you apply. I think for preparation for September, for those preparing for September exam, just have some sort of study plan. Find your baseline, find what needs more attention, and again, we can work through it together. It's the whole point here is, if you don't tell me what problem you have, we can't work together and we can't help each other. So good luck. Everybody has the chance to do well in the GAMSAT, and for those sitting Casper exam, please sit it if you are considering medicine next year, because it's just another easy, not easy, but it gives you another avenue to get into medicine. So I would definitely consider the Casper exam. Well, thanks for your time. Thanks for coming along, Kelly. I'll talk to you tomorrow anyway. Have a fantastic weekend, everybody else, and we'll talk soon. Bye now.